This is Henry.
Henry, hi, this is Carl from 101.5 KFLY. We have an interview scheduled.
We sure do.
Good morning, sir. How are you?
Oh, I'm fine. How are you doing?
I am doing well. It's an honor to talk with you. I got the chance to speak with you a couple of years ago before your tour that came through Eugene. Great show, man.
Oh, thank you very much.
Now you're going on another spoken word tour, hitting the capitals of every city in the U.S. How did that come about?
Oh, see, that's just it. I didn't do it. The agents did, and they took quite a beating trying to slot it all together. My agent, John, from Pinnacle, he came at me in the spring of last year with this idea. So, like a year and many months ago, he said, here's an idea for 2012. How about you do a tour of every capital city, and the last show is on the eve of the election in Washington, D.C. I said, that's the best single idea I've ever heard for a tour as far as a concept. So he said, what do you think? I said, let's go. So we started booking it that day. So this thing has been in the works for well over a year. So it was John's idea, and, John's people on the phones trying to slot it all into position. I had nothing to do with it. I just, I have to go out and do it, of course, but I didn't put it together.
For people that haven't seen you ever do any of these spoken word tours, what can they expect on this particular tour?
Basically, it's a very simple format. I'm on stage alone with a microphone. There's no rear projection or interesting lighting. And I talk about where I've been, what I saw, and how I feel about it. And a lot of travel stories is a big chunk of what I'm talking about on stage, just, telling stories from travel from all over the world that I do pretty often. And I go everywhere from North Korea to Uganda, Cuba, Haiti, Sudan, Bhutan, Mongolia. Truly, I go to these places, and you come back with some pretty interesting stories. You see a lot of good and a lot of bad and a lot of, sad things. And so I talk about all of that. Also, I have many decades of history to draw upon from, going out into the world. But, often something from the past pops up. And as things break, news-wise, I sometimes weigh in on some of that if I think I can lend a unique POV to that situation.
Now, one of the things that I remember from your last tour at the McDonald Theater in Eugene was that, a lot of these places that people have kind of a perception of, especially like places like North Korea, for example, you've been to these places and a lot of people are, so afraid to even think to go there. But you take the absolute opposite approach where you just, it's not that bad, believe it or not. And, you really should go to these places. Yeah,
and certainly there are places in the world where your life is at great risk. As a Westerner, I mean, it can go very bad for you. Like I'm not about to go walking around Mogadishu thinking that it could not turn out really badly for me around any corner. Or that is to say, I'm not willing to roll the dice to see if I'm wrong about that unless I got really good advice. But in other parts of the world that we're supposed to be afraid of, those Middle Easterners, they're a bunch of, when you go to Middle Eastern countries, the level of civility, the level of politeness is to the point where you want to tell them to loosen up a little. I mean, they're so stiffly polite, it's just, it's frustrating. But and as far as like walking around feeling safe, you're quite safe in these places. Well, as safe as you can be, without a meteor falling on your head.
Right.
I've been way more kind of looking around, guarding myself in parts of America than I have on the streets of Bangladesh or Sri Lanka.
Yeah, I mean, just today the news broke in Chicago and New York with all those crazy mass shootings.
Yeah, well, that's America. America loves its guns. You're never going to get them away from Americans. That's just how it is. And that's some people, that's how they're resolving conflict now. They just, instead of arguing or suing or walking it off, they are just picking up their firearms. You could look forward to more of that in your lifetime in this country. I think I'm going to be right about that. Obviously, I want to be wrong, but I think that's going to be more of these, like, I got mad at my boss, so I shot him. I think we're going to have more of that. I mean, just in the last 3 months, it's been, pretty sad.
Now, when you come back to the States after these trips, how does it change your perceptions of America?
Well, it makes me feel very fortunate to be an American. I mean, you want to take a shower today, I don't think that's all that much a challenge. It may be to your schedule, but the possibility of you finding some hot water, I think you got that one wired.
Yeah.
And I don't even know you. And I think you probably can arrange that. Parts of Sudan, Uganda, not so much. And so when you see what passes for the day-to-day in a lot of countries, in a lot of cities, the incredible caloric burn it takes to get through a day in downtown Dhaka, Bangladesh, it's heavy. And when you come back here, and what's the worst thing you deal with? Traffic jam and a trip to the DMV, and the guy who is on his cell phone talking loudly next to you in the treadmill at the gym. I mean, and sure enough, real Americans do have real worry. I'm not trying to minimize it. I'm just saying what passes for another Friday in like parts of India, you wouldn't believe that's normal, but it is.
And what's interesting about that is, I think Americans overall have a general feeling of worry and fear kind of beyond what they really have to deal with. And I mean, even politically, when you look at the back and forth of what's going on this year in this election cycle, it seems that, it's just, absolute terror if you pick one guy or the other.
And quite honestly, and thankfully, a few people like Frank Rich and some of those guys who are kind of very, very talented and very smart and funny, in my opinion. They said, look, it doesn't matter who becomes president. You're still. I mean, Subway, the sandwich organization, they're still making sandwiches next Tuesday. I mean, the buses will still run. Life goes on. I mean, pick anything that happened in America after the Civil War. Life went on. New president, say it's Mitt Romney. Your life will, maybe there'll be some changes, but it's not as if all of a sudden you're growing an extra thumb. And so I think we have gotten a little hysterical, some of us, with this stuff. I mean, I definitely have my presidential candidate in mind, who I'll be voting for in November. I mean, that's I'm going to vote, and I would never tell you who to vote for. I wouldn't dare. I would hope that you do vote, and that democracy needs you. Who you vote for is, quite frankly, none of my business, and really not that interesting to me. And that's you. That's your world. That's your life. And I just applaud that you're voting. If I say you're voting for someone I disagree with, may the best person win, because ultimately I got to live under, well, to a certain extent, the rule book of that person for 4 years. And so I hope it works. I hope it works out well for me, because I love eating every day. But I think we have, with the advent of 24/7 news and the kind of rise of the angry pundit radio dude, I think there's a whole lot of invective being hurled, and not always a lot of substantive information. And the real information is always kind of calm, in that here's the numbers, here's what he said, here's what Congress did yesterday. No need to raise our voices. You don't need to call me a commie. It's really not necessary. We can have a civil disagreement, and I'm really not going to try and slash your tires. And so I'm missing that in America. I don't like the polarization. I don't like to be so pitted against someone I disagree with. It's a bit much.